This is FanSpeak, a weekly live show where the fans of comics and its community are our guests. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to FanSpeak for what is this? The 6th of May? Whew, time is flying away. But happy to have you guys in here, of course. We're going to be getting into our FanSpeak news today, and today we're going to be focusing more on video games, as you can see in the title, Sex and Gaming. I'm not going to make this particularly lewd, but this is obviously a little bit more of an adult conversation. This is a show isn't necessarily for kids, although I'm not going to do a drawn and quartered level of what we do, but we are going to talk about it. So thank you for joining us for that. We hope you guys check out our links down below, particularly to our FanSpeak page over on Facebook. Also, hit me up on my Twitter if you want to be on any of these shows, you have ideas for these shows, or you want to try your hand at being an artist in the drawn and quartered Ultimate Edition. This week we are doing Lord of the Rings. That should be pretty cool. There's so much subject matter there, and I'm kind of curious to see what people do. I do hope someone does a Nazgul. That would be neat. But we'll see. But it's going to be a lot of fun, I'm sure. We had great fun with Dan Fraga last week's Drawn and Quarter. That was a really cool interview, is what it kind of turned out to be, and that was neat. Anyway, let me come over here and say hello to our panelists before we get into our conversation. Of course, we have Slick Jimmy with us. How you doing there, sir? From the land of the newborn sun.
The land of newborn sun. Yeah, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm great, dude. I'm actually happy to have you here. I think this is a topic you would have an opinion on. We also have, of course, joining us, the creator of many things, an illustrious artist himself. We have Todd Mulrooney.
Hey, how you doing? I just dropped the Florida Man launching page into the chat, so hopefully anyone watching wants to get on board. Some exclusives early. There's going to be a vintage trading a postcard that we're giving to those people who get on early.
Oh, no, that sounds cool. And I like the postcard. You did that some of that drawing live on one of the shows we were doing. You know what you should do? You should come on and see if you can't get one of the other guys from the book to come on to the Monday show. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on with the distribution, some of the Geppy interviews, and we'll talk about Florida Man. Is there anybody you can get to drag on and have a chat about it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, let's do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this Monday we'll talk about Florida Man and we'll talk about Diamond, and because there's been a couple of interviews that are pretty interesting. Awesome. Now, of course, we just had I think Niobe just dropped in here. Is that what I just saw pop in on me? I think it is.
Am I in this thing?
Yep,
You
that's
can
fair.
be, sure. This is open to
Damn.
everybody. We're talking about sex and gaming. What do you think about that, Larry?
Well, when I saw the title, I'm like, I immediately put in the chat, I want in on this. And I remember you telling me, come to the Discord. So
Yep.
you just broke my Discord cherry, like.
Oh, it's perfect timing for the conversation. Cherries have been broken, everybody. Very
Right?
nice. Yeah, but no, FanSpeak and comics news today and stuff like that, they're open to everybody, especially FanSpeak. Anybody can jump in and be part of it. And I really like the fact that we moved it over to Discord. And I have the ultimate moderator. He's one of the best moderators there are anyway. But he's also has complete tool control over Discord, so he'll deal with anybody who needs dealing with, I'm sure. And therefore, I should
There you go.
introduce him, and I'm going to. And how should I do it today? Oh, I know. Because we're talking about sex and gaming, I'll have to involve water. Oh, okay. Coming across the ocean, approaching from the coast, lathers of foaming sea coming up around and enfolding his nudeness to hide it from those who are, easily shamed. Electricity bolting out of his nostrils and eyes as he lands, full formed, on the beach and says, "Ha! I shall judge thee." He is Thundero.
Yeah, my nudeness does shame people. It's true. It's very true. This is all true. What he's saying.
It's true. It is true.
In your Titanic was.
You're right. All right,
There
cool.
was a time when I was in that good of shape, Chester. Not so much anymore, but there was a time.
Me too, dude. Yeah, me too.
Time.
Yeah. No, I used to be in spectacular condition, dude. But now I got the dad bod. That's all right. It gets it kind of comes, I suppose. But I suppose if I really
That's
tried,
how it
I could
goes.
get rid of it. So
Oh, I definitely could. I'm just lazy. I mean,
yeah.
there's no reason to make excuses. I know if I put in the effort for a few months, I could drop 40 or 50 pounds in no time. I've done it before.
Yeah, well,
Can do it again.
Larry's in good shape though. Larry's a pretty man.
He's a beautiful
Whoa!
man.
I was like looking at my dad bod myself today. I got out of the shower. I'm like, Jesus, I think I'm getting pregnant. Like, I gotta do something about this. It's like this
Yeah,
whole like sitting around doing nothing for like the last 2 months is like put on some weight. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying?
Well, that was a decade ago for me, but that's all right. My wife doesn't seem to mind, and I still got the pecs and the pectorals and all those bicepty things. So it's all right. It's all right.
It's
I
all right.
guess. Anyway, all right. Well, before we get into today's conversation, I think we should primer the conversation today to just talk about how much. And let me start with a caveat because we are talking about sex and gaming, and I'm going to speak about something very specific. And this was prompted by the other day. I think it was on TFT where we were talking about how vicious and how much of an inundation of pornography there is these days, and how there have been many studies that have shown us that pornography and excessive pornography, especially for young people, is really bad for their brain. Right. And that prompted me to think about some of the things I've been seeing in video gaming and wanted me to make a conversation. But the caveat I need to put on it is not be hypocritical, right? I spent a big chunk of my life in the sex industry. You guys know this. I was a bouncer, right? I've been in and around the sex industry for more than a decade. So I'm not being hypocritical at all. I'm just coming at the fact that we have new information, and I have a different opinion than I would have when I was younger. Now I don't know if that's because I'm a dad and the things change. I don't know, but we'll get into that. But just to put it out there, yes, I understand that I worked a long time in the sex industry, and I'm not hiding from that. So, but anyway, let's get into the topic itself. What do you guys think in general? Is pornography good, bad? Is there too much of it? Is there too little of it? What is your general consensus of pornography in our world today? And let me start with Todd.
Oh Jesus, come right to the dad.
Well, there's a lot of dads in here, dude.
I know, I know. Yeah, it's too easily accessible. That's what I think. I don't know if there's too much or too little, but it's way too easy to be accessed by just anybody. I'll say that.
Okay, all right. Well, that's interesting. What do you think, Slick?
I would tend to agree that the ease of access to, like okay, let me be a little bit. Let me craft a narrative. I've always liked the female form, even when I was a little kid.
Sure.
All right. Um, I really appreciated the boobs of my nursery the person my babysitter. Her name was Amy, and I remember her. I remember leaning into. I remember in kindergarten being had a crush on a girl named Melinda, and it moved on up. All right. However, in my youth, you struggled to find like a Playboy, or anything like that, which is just pretty tasteful nudity, or like something you might find in the back of an old Cosmo or a Victoria's Secret catalog.
Uh-huh.
That was about the extent of
National Geographic.
Yeah, National Geo. But I mean, even that,
Sears catalog.
Sears
Bra
catalogs,
section.
yeah, like Sears and J.C. Penney
Yeah,
catalogs of the lingerie sections. All right, maybe a Sports Illustrated, swimsuit issue, something like that. Which showed the female form and celebrated it, which I have no problem with celebrating not only the female form but the male form, because it's in its apex, it's a beautiful thing
Oh yeah,
to look at.
it's true.
However, to appreciate it properly and not just sit there and whack off. And I'm going to be honest, we had a renter that had Victoria's Secret come when I was a teenager, and after a little while, like after my use of the visual, I started to read it, and now I know all the names of what actual lingerie is because
wow.
I can tell you all the parts and pieces if you want me to. I can tell you the difference between a bustier and a Merry-Widow, that sort of thing. However, that didn't. I don't think it broke my brain. But if I was exposed to, say, bestiality or a 30-man gangbang on some unsuspecting young, that they make it rough, all right,
Right.
that's going to start to skew what you see.
Yeah.
If I'm 10 years old and I see, triple penetration,
What?
that's
I didn't
not
even know that
good.
was a thing. Um, okay. I did have a
Uh,
girlfriend that made the two hands and three holes joke. But anyway, um,
well, and
the,
there's even worse than that. I'm just making, for instance, you can think it right now and you can find it right now, and that's a problem.
Yeah, now it's interesting that you mentioned it like that, and I know this is an odd conversation, but I think it's an interesting one. And the simple fact of the matter is, we know that video games, music, stuff like that, have been under attack for the longest time. Right now, video games, especially violence in video games, have been attacked. They've tried to ban things. They've tried to tear things down. And it's ongoing. It's nothing. It's gone away. It's still here. But we've had a lot of studies to show there is no correlation between violent acts and violent video games. None. And they've done a lot of studies to try to prove it. But yet they have studies on the other hand with the sexual stuff to show there is an effect. So
Well,
it's not a double standard, I think.
let's think of the difference though between that, right? If it, when it comes to sexuality, and sexuality has a purpose, it's the continuation of the species. But if things are easily accessed that are a surrogate for the real thing and just give you the release, and you don't have to fight, literally go out and compete to gain the affections of a female and to woo them, and for the purpose of creating a pair bond, and therefore creating more life.
Mhm.
It just becomes something that you don't have to work hard at, and
Yeah,
especially as you see more and more and more of it, you get inundated, and your brain starts to not want to go fight for that. And a lot of boys, especially boys, women have a sexual market value when they're young.
oh yeah,
It's very easy, especially if they're attractive, to get stuff. Guys, even if they're sexually attractive, unless they're the alphas, it's a pretty hard road to hoe unless somebody kind of shows you the steps,
sure.
gives you a little bit of a pathway,
You do have to
and then
game the
you
system. That's true. Yeah.
right. But if you don't have to do that, and you can still get the same effect, basically, um, the release, then there's going to be this segment of the population that's never going to try.
Yeah.
And then
Well,
what do we have now?
I get your point, and I think it's gone beyond a little bit above and beyond the pale. I did a little bit of research in looking into for this today's conversation, and you mentioned bestiality, and my initial thinking on that, because I just can't kind of came across it, and I realized that it's basically legal these days, at least in video form, and I was like, how did that happen? That was full on illegal last I remember.
Well, it does depend on the jurisdiction. Where I live, they find you with that, you're going to get in trouble. But it's really hard, I suppose, to police the internet too much. I mean,
I
I guess
suppose,
they
but
find it.
it's not hidden, right? It's just a keyword search, and I was really surprised by that because I thought that should be still illegal, but seemingly it's not. Let's move on because we're doing the initial impressions here. Larry, do you have something to add to this conversation?
Well, yeah, of course, it's too easily available. I mean, the internet has made it that way, right? I mean, James, touched upon back in the day. You had to hunt for that. Like the old stash of Playboys or Penthouse magazines. You guys
Yeah,
even brought up, the National Geographic if you're
Sure.
that desperate to be in the library, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean the internet's 95% porn, isn't it? Like,
It feels
you
this
know,
way, doesn't it? It feels this way.
yeah.
Like I said, I don't have a problem with it. Although I think these recent studies should be, take heeded. It's just I think it's too much in your face, and it's but then again, we might have to bring into the conversation the nature of the beast itself, meaning humanity. And maybe there's something involved in that as well. But okay, all right, Zach.
Oh, hey, it was just real quick. It looks like I don't. What are you doing later, Chester? Do you have to go do things?
Not until a little bit later. I have a little free time. Yeah, sure. What's up?
No, it's because it looks like Mike might have to cancel D&Q Pros tonight for he has to take his wife to the hospital.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't know if you had time to host it.
Oh goodness, no, I don't. I don't. No,
Okay.
I don't have that kind of time. No. That's too bad. Tell him sorry. But I have, I wish I'd known earlier. I could have adjusted my schedule, but
No
no,
worries, no worries. This was like literally just found out.
Does his
Okay.
wife
Get Edwin to host that. That's what you
No,
should
I
do.
have no idea, but
Yeah,
just
so-
get
that's true,
Edwin.
Larry.
Edwin should host it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Edwin.
yeah. Well, no, Edwin isn't going to be there either because he already has. That's the
Oh,
thing.
that's
It's
right.
like Edwin.
Yeah, that's right.
Edwin's doing stuff now.
Yeah.
So that's all.
That's
all. I was
all
just
right.
going to jump in, and I don't mean to interrupt the whole topic and everything, but
Yeah.
No, don't, please don't. Do you have an opinion on the topic?
sex and gaming.
Yeah, well, just the proliferation of pornography in general is what the topic is right now.
Oh yeah, I think it's gotten to the point where like people are so desensitized that people keep pushing it further and harder. It's because they're getting so desensitized from it.
Mm.
And I blame that mostly on its accessibility and like on the internet and the fact that you can pretty much bring it up on your phone. It's like it's in everybody's pocket.
Yeah. Well,
You
and, another thing I noticed with it, because I usually don't involve myself with it. I like I said, I'm not a prude. I don't have anything against it particularly. It's just not my shtick, right? But the thing is, I've noticed it's everywhere and it's free. I don't even know how they're making money in the industry, to be honest with you.
If you go, there's a few really good documentaries on Netflix that actually talk about that and how the industry is really tanking. And
I would imagine. Yeah.
and whatnot because of this and because of like the live services and whatnot.
Mhm.
So.
Well, see, and I didn't even take that in. I didn't even think about live pornography. I didn't even think about that. I suppose that exists as well, huh?
So
Huh.
it's everything's and it's getting worse. I would just say, and it's like I'm kind of waiting for the huge backlash to happen, the pendulum to swing back.
Yeah. Well,
like how far are we going to push it before the
Yeah.
pendulum starts to swing backwards?
everything does like
So-
that, but I also wonder if our opinions are a little different because there's a bunch of dads in here.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
I kind of wonder. But anyway, thank you, Zach. Thundero?
Well, my opinion is interesting. I agree with you guys for the most part. And I was looking at my phone, and I shouldn't have because conveniently we were talking about this, and somebody just shared an article that a North Texas university had a lecture on the sexual pleasure that infants feel, and it just made my blood boil. So I completely forgot what I was going to say, but it kind of ties into it
Well,
because
it does.
the idea
Who's
that
studying that?
some
Yeah,
North
right.
Texas university.
I mean,
the
I'm sure that there's probably some actual truth to that, but who's studying that?
Well, right. Why
Bother.
like
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
possible to be gained?
Anatomically, technically, sexuality is with you from the womb, inside the womb.
Yeah.
Just technically. But there's no need to understand. Why should we understand that? We
I
don't need to understand that. But
But-
I
but
get you.
this-
I'm sorry. Go
this
ahead.
is my point, and it goes to your point. Is we've become so desensitized to it that now they're doing things like that in a university,
Yeah.
and this person isn't beaten publicly for it Because in order to observe that, I would assume, I didn't read the entire paper, but I would assume he had to stimulate it.
Yeah. That's horrible.
Yeah. So my point is this is one of the reasons why we have to have better moderation for all sexuality. Because when you open the door blanketly, anybody can walk in and be like, well, if this is the argument over here, why doesn't it work for this, and this? And that's already happened. In the last, decade, we have seen a massive degeneration of the value of sex in our culture, people.
And that might well be intentional,
Well, I do think it is, but it's something that the backlash is growing more and more. Like you're talking about, there's plenty of studies out now, that scientific studies that prove that this is really, really bad psychologically, mentally, physically, in every possible facet of a human being. It's bad for you to be that inundated with sexuality. Some people are just, they just have that like sex gene, and they're fine. They're fine in that environment, but most people aren't like that. Most people are pretty moderate when it comes to sexuality.
We call them nymphos.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And unfortunately, because no one wants to make the argument that maybe women shouldn't be allowed to do these things, which is the real argument that comes down to, then you have men who will go and exploit them and just do terrible things on camera to them and tell them that it's okay because look how empowered you are. Yeah. When in reality, they're not being empowered. They're being destroyed.
Yeah. Well, interesting opening salvo, I think. I'm going to narrow this down to video games here at the end of the show, but next we're going to talk about it in comic books. But let me catch up with the chat real quick. Let's see. Hello, everybody. The Metal says, ahoy there. Well, nice to see you. Nick C says, Dr. Britt Baker at DMD is a role model. A role model, Chester. I'm assuming that's a joke. This is some kind of porn star, maybe.
That's a professional wrestling joke, and her gimmick is that she's a bad guy, but she thinks she's a role model because she's a dentist.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Nick. Awesome. Lady Celtic Moon says, hi. Roger's in here. It's nice. Timothy Best says, whoa, gaming and sex in the same sentence. Yeah, well, it's a thing, dude. We got Nick saying, Slick and Todd together again. Death battle. No, that's all right. We worked that out. Real Comics. Hey, dude. And Timothy Best. Some sex gaming going on here. Mm-hmm. Nick C. I was a stripper bouncer, Chester 2020. I see you caught that. Oh well. Timothy Best says, "Damn, Chester was wild." And does that mean what? Okay, I guess I get that. Raythul says, "Bouncy strippers are the best strippers." Well, that's not the point of the conversation, Raythulo. Ninja says, "Hey kids, guess I got here just in time. 30 dude gang bangs. What? Yeah, well, it's a weird conversation, isn't it? But I think it's an important one. So shame on those parents that don't monitor that. Well, I mean that's a fair point, Roger. I mean, as a parent, is this not your responsibility? Isn't it? I certainly monitored my household as far as those things were concerned, even down to certain animations and stuff that I thought were a little bit too suggestive. I wouldn't let my kids watch because when they become older, when they became teenagers, I unshackled them and let them go about it. But as a child, most certainly, I was paying very close attention. It seems that this isn't the case, though. I don't know.
No, it's not. Unfortunately, there is a lot of parents who don't have those strict guidelines. In fact, there are parents who think it's perfectly fine for a child to look at pornography and things nowadays. It's horrifically disgusting that there's people who think that way and that the rest of polite society allows them to.
Well, there's still laws against that. I mean, there is. As far as I know, there are actually federal laws against that.
There is, yeah, but
so, and there should be.
Let it, don't think it's fine.
Because the stuff that has happened to children and to I'm going to make a delineation between children and teenagers. There is definitely a delineation. Has been going on for millennia. However, there are rules in society generally, at least our Western society, that have tried to mitigate that, especially in the last, I would say, 100 years. Back in the 1800s, a 10-year-old could be married off. So
Yeah,
I
sure,
mean,
but it's a little bit
things have
different
changed.
situation. And of course, historically, 14 was the average age for a girl to marry, whereas 18 was the average age for a boy. This is
Yeah.
just how we function. That's not the same conversation, but I get you.
Well, I know
Uh,
we're getting, but it all has to do with the sexuality component
yeah.
of how how things have extrapolated out now that we have the modern age of, like, information spreading across the world, and all kinds of things that we have access to that,
Hmm.
just 25 years ago we didn't,
Yeah, no,
and that
and
went.
and Nick is mentioning a Brave New World, and of course, I would also put Ayn Rand in there. She said this was going to happen as well. But no, I get you, Slick. And another thing, keep this in mind, guys. Sodomy is illegal in most states and many majority of countries around the world, but yet gay marriage is now legal. Is that a conundrum?
Yeah, it's well, it's not a conundrum. It's just a complete, you know, oxymoron. It doesn't make any sense. How is that possible?
Yeah.
But it's just because there's laws on the books. I mean, I think they may have gotten rid of it, but there was at one point a law in a midwestern state. I want to say it was Indiana, but that could be wrong. Where they weren't allowed to have cherry pie on Sunday or something like that, or whipped cream on cherry pie on Sunday, or some ridiculously weird thing in some place in Indiana.
Why?
So I probably because of what they assume is the reason it exists is because people would go to, like, instead of closing on Sunday, some of, like, restaurants would be open, like ones that just sold soda and just sweets and stuff like that.
Sure.
Um, so they would stay open on Sunday instead of being closed when, back in the day, everything was supposed to be closed on
This
Sunday.
is true. I lived in one of those towns, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's where the sundae comes from. The ice cream sundae. It's because the soda jerks and the bars and stuff like that weren't allowed to be open on Sunday, and to make
Yep.
revenue, they would make the ice cream desserts and stuff, and that's where the sundae comes from. But yeah, it's a fair point. A fair point. Let me see here. Yeah, I hope Mike's wife is doing well, Nick. I'll send him a DM, and you guys should as well. Send him a DM, and hopefully his wife is well. There's nothing particularly wrong. That sounds scary. Let's see. Medical children studies back in 2004 proved children first saw hardcore pornography online at average age of 5 years old. What?
What?
Jesus, dude.
Who's not policing? Man,
It's
this is
irritating.
coming from a guy who does an adult book. I mean,
Yeah, and this is the problem, right? And I think the breakdown for us is coming between children and adult, right? Because as an
Mhm.
adult, I don't think many of us have too much trouble with stuff. Well, maybe I shouldn't put words in your mouth, but yeah, hold on a second. Let me get through this chat real quick, and we'll get into the second part of the conversation. Now, where's Booster tonight? Well, he wouldn't add much, to be honest with you. Bullet says a lot of porn stars stream on Twitch. I mean, Booster jokes and makes a lot of jokes about stuff, but he's not actually into that kind of stuff. It's just his character for the show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. It's an act, right? Backdoor Butterfinger. Oh goodness, I don't even want to know what that is.
Are
Um,
you trying to tell us that Booster has zero experience with girls
no, I don't
on
think
No.
every
he does. I
level?
think he's had a
no,
girlfriend too in the past.
I
Yeah.
know, I'm just
he just needs to get one. He needs to get one right now.
Yeah. Real
He
bad.
could use one, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he really could.
But it's all an act. The whole Ezra Miller and all that stuff. It's just a carry. It's funny. It's cool. But he's not actually like that at all. Devilish Borden, it was probably Indiana. Well, we have loads of dumb stuff like that on the books still. A lot of states have strange things, dude, and some of them were just what the people were feeling at the time. A lot of them are simply because they're I lost my train of thought because I saw Abdul's thing. A lot of them is because of politic, right? Can someone please throw a DM for this show, a Discord to DeWolf, please? I don't know why he doesn't have one already, but someone please source out DeWolf. Bullet,
A
I
lot of
DM'd his
these,
wife. Oh, cool.
you were talking about these laws, right? And what people don't realize, we know what it takes to get something become a law now.
Yeah.
But it used to only take a room full of men to raise their hands and be over majority vote.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So it's just strange to think that. So, like, you could go and look at any, like you say, any town or any state's books and go, oh my God, you can't ride a horse on a certain day of the week, or stupid crap, like the stupidest stuff. Or when there were street lights, you couldn't ride a horse through a street through a red light, and just weird stuff that was laws
Yeah,
as we industrialized.
sure. And I know there's like one Midwest law that says you're not allowed to marry your donkey specifically.
Yeah,
My question is why is there only one? And was that such a problem in that specific area
It probably had
that
to
they
do with
needed a law for it?
it's probably had to do with the gold rush and putting
It's
claims to donkeys and stuff like. I'm sure people were doing that kind of crap.
Oh
Uh,
no!
it's against the law to fish here in Utah with a crossbow, but you can do it with a compound bow.
Wow, that's interesting. Um, there are a lot of weird rules. All right, so I caught up with chat, and of course, chat. If you have any opinions on things as we're going along, please put them up. I have now with using Discord. I now have all the chats and everything in one place, so it's a lot easier for me to interact. It's cool. So thank you for that. But let's move on to the next part of the conversation before I move into the last part. Comic books and sex. Now, Slick's perfect here because he does have a comic that it's not a sex comic per se, but it certainly alludes to some horrific aspects of it and some, I guess, positive sides of it. But now,
Mm,
well, I'll
well,
let you speak for yourself. But let me start out with a little bit of Stan Lee's opinion on the thing. Now keep in mind, Stan Lee did create Stripperella. Let's keep that in mind, right? But Stan Lee very much felt that Marvel Comics should not have any overt sexuality involved with it, simply because of the demographic that they were trying to sell to, and he was very much against it, which is why DC Comics always tended to have more sexuality than Marvel did. Now things might well be changing, and they seemingly are changing. Seeing as Marvel really wants to push the idea of using some of their characters to mentally force Iceman into being homosexual, and constantly playing upon the whole aspects of sexuality, particularly deviant sexuality. And I don't care if you like my use of that word or not; it is deviance by definition. So, what do you guys think about where the comic books seem to be moving? Because they seem to be moving that way too. I mean,
I mean,
mainstream comic books. I'm not talking about sex books; those have been around forever. I'm talking about mainstream comics. We just saw the Batwang last year.
well, I mean, like, are you asking me?
I'm asking all of you, but you can start.
But all right, well, I do think that comic books, if you're going to add sexuality and adult situations, and that doesn't just mean sexuality. There are a lot of concepts. They're just above children's, conception. They can't understand it.
You know,
And so, like the Max line, all right, that's it said it was explicit and it was for adults.
yeah,
That's how you do that, all right.
sure,
And you put it up high. You keep it away from kids. And the kids section, if you want to do that at a comic shop, should be over there for all ages. This should be done, all right. If you're going to do that, and you should know as a person who's purveying these products, what you want to have that out there on the shelf where young children can get it. But in adults have read crap erotica and fine erotica and for a long time, and appreciated the nude form, which is different, I think, personally, than pornography at large.
Mhm.
And so that has to happen, and there has to be responsibility of the people who sell and the people who buy to keep it out of children's reach and
Yeah.
knowledge. I mean, if you're going to buy a book that has a lot of nudity and put it on the coffee table, well, unless I guess you're a naturist and kids are super used to that, well, that's probably going to be a little bit controversial if people come over and you have
Naturist, is
kids.
that what we call nudists these days?
Yeah, that's what they call them, a nudist.
Right.
And there is a subculture that nudity isn't a big deal, but I mean,
Yeah, sure. I mean, like here in Japan, for instance, it is the normal thing for children to take baths with their family. It's normal, right?
yeah,
It's not so nudity unto itself is not an issue here in Japan. But of course, that is not sexuality, however.
No, it's
Right.
there's a dividing line.
There
The problem
certainly
is
is.
where that gets grayed. I think in the United States, anytime there is nudity, it's weird that you can show, a mass murder on a TV show, like, say, and Dangerous Mind. What's the Criminal Minds? They have all this horrific shit,
Yeah.
but you can't show a woman's nipples or somebody's butt.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It is
It's
weird.
weird.
Yeah, and here in Japan, it's quite the opposite. If you get a Z rating, which is their M rating here in Japan, to get a Z rating, nipples and things like that, nudity is not an issue. But what will get you that Z rating is blood.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
it's culturally different. That's true. Yeah.
totally. I mean, if you go to somewhere, say, like, well, I don't know how it is now, but when I went back in the '90s to Sweden, a soap ad would just have a naked gal soaping up, on TV, and you like,
Yeah.
okay,
Well, that's interesting you mentioned that. I'm going to move to Larry here in a minute because I want to hear what he has to say. But it is kind of interesting. I was rewatching some MASH. I love MASH. It's one of the greatest shows ever made. And I was just watching some old MASH episodes with my wife. And I haven't watched it in so long since I've been married. And there was an episode in season one where Henry was in Tokyo, and Hawkeye and Trapper went to try to convince him to come back to the 4077, and he was in doing all the normal things that GI would do in Tokyo, and one of those was going to a soap land. And they had them in the soap land, and they were having their dialogue. But if you weren't a military man or not a person familiar with Japan, you wouldn't understand what you were seeing. But for me, I was like, "Whoa!" My wife too, because the soap land is their version of a brothel, right? But they could get away with it. And then what? This is the '70s, right? With Mash, right? So that was pretty interesting. But wait a minute, cultures are different. Yeah, that's right, John. What do you think, Larry?
Well, I mean, you got a couple of perfect guys for the show, I think, because
Yeah,
my comic book has some pretty sexy imagery on it too, right? Especially when it comes to the covers. In the book itself, Niobe doesn't even have sex. She doesn't even kiss anyone. But we do use the sex cell sort of model with our covers. With CB Zing, with RB White, with Steph Wilson, and that's done purposely. People like to buy the sexy covers. I think there's a fine line between sexy and pornography.
oh yeah,
We haven't done any of the risque covers, but I'll tell you something. We've been asked a lot. And if we did it, we could probably make some bank if we really wanted to. But I don't know if that's the road we want to travel. I like keeping it sexy, but just to the point where we're not crossing the line into something else. You know what I mean?
yeah. Well,
see, and I've kind of embraced that though with my book. However, I have made a modified book, which is the modest, which is still quite risque, and then there's there's full nudity. But I have made the caveat every time I sell my book that this is not for children, and it shouldn't be put in front of children, and I stand by that. I
yeah,
think that things are for adults, and the problem is people are not paying attention to that, and some people don't think that's a big deal, and we're seeing that that's not the truth,
yeah. Well,
especially from formative years up.
no, and I agree. And Larry, just so you know, we had a conversation a little bit about this on Pontificators many shows back, and Artie Bear was talking directly about the decision an artist has to make. Are you going to do, a cheesecake or not? I guess that wouldn't be the right word. Are you going to do, pornographic imagery, or as an artist, or are you not? And he promoted that you not do that because in the long run it will hurt you, it will limit you. And another point I'd like to make to Larry and to all of you guys is the fact that if we think way back to Looney Tunes and Bugs Bunny, there was a lot of such sexual suggestive things coming out of Bugs Bunny,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it was done in such a way that the children wouldn't catch it.
Well, and there was a reason for that.
Sure.
I mean, most people, well, most young people don't understand that these cartoons were put in between the A and B movies,
Yep.
and there were reels, and they were supposed to entertain people from 8 to 80. And so there were layers, and they were really well written. So there's a lot of slapstick, and they hold up today. And a lot of them are these really old cartoons still are funny today, even though some of the actual references might be awfully dated. But Yeah, you're right. If you look in there, there's a lot of sexual innuendo that
There is.
entertains the adult, but children, it just flies over their heads.
It is, but I once again I think this is not what we're talking about though, because sexuality and having a sexy lady and stuff like that are always around us, and this is part of the education of a child growing up. I don't think that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about brutal, horrific, in-your-face pornography that is becoming more and more mainstream. That's my main topic today. But I'm sorry, Larry. Please continue.
No, I mean you're right. I mean I do cheesecake sort of comic book. I mean in covers mostly. There's a fine line. You mentioned like I think the word you're looking for is risque. That's what the artists like to call it when they're
Okay.
drawing like nudes and stuff, right? You have like your sort of normal cover, and if they want to like allude to a nude cover, they would call it a risque cover, right? We've never done that. Never done that. And if you start doing that, the problem is that's what you're going to become known for, and that's the issue I have with it.
All right. Well, there you go. And that's what exactly what Art was saying. Same thing. Yeah. Let's see. Where have I gone from? Oh, Todd. What do you think about? And once again, we're talking about extreme types of sexuality in comic books.
It's always it's. I'll tell you what. From day one, it's always been there. The accessibility though wasn't right because I can remember when I was a kid. They came in almost like a half sleeve, like a brown paper bag kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if the store put them on it, but they were called top shelf, and they were on the top shelf. And I remember my first time going in a store, I couldn't reach them, but I didn't know what they were anyway, so it didn't matter because they didn't look like anything I wanted to begin with. But that's what they were called, top shelf. So the accessibility was different. I don't know that the stores even bother to carry, like I in my store, I guess if you wanted it in your hold, they would put it in there, but they don't put it on their shelves because it's just not a real top seller. Now, if you're talking about the Lady Deaths and the Vampirellas and that stuff's always been there, because you look back at the genesis of all that stuff, and it was just basically there was a sort of movement where we pushed the female characters, but we pushed them for their sexuality, not for their what latte they wanted. We pushed them back in the 90s for how they looked and their sexuality, and it was cool to put girls on the covers and things like that. So it began that there was the genesis of all these characters getting their own books, female characters getting their own books. Catwoman was very endowed, drawn by Jim Ballant back in the day. So it comes from that, and there's a place for it.
Sure.
That's material that people want. Certain books can sell. Putting it on a cover, even though that's not the interior, can sell that book a little bit better. Getting a cover by Adam Hughes, who charges I think $8,000 for a cover, will get you about 10,000 more copies sold easily. Maybe 100,000 for a DC or Marvel book. So these things have their place. It's funny how the industry. The thing I want to talk about is funny how the industry has pointed a finger at certain people, but not everyone, right? They've pointed a finger over here at Frank Cho. They've pointed a finger over at Milo Manera. But you know what? Nobody dares point a finger at Adam Hughes.
Yeah.
You commission a cover from him, you know what you're going to get, and you don't ever tell Adam Hughes, hey, don't go too big and Power Girls bust, because he ain't going to hear it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's funny how the industry just sort of dances around this.
Well,
and bless him for that, because Power Girl.
Yeah,
Well,
that's true, right? Yeah.
There is, for those who have seen the works of Avatar Press, and that's an American press. We're not talking like stuff that comes out of Europe that is more digital online things like Go Fantasy, which is really dark. But Avatar Press has done things like Crossed, which is a horrific book. It's literally horrific.
It is,
and the situation and this is books you could buy on the shelves. I mean, there's a place up in Salt Lake that sells A lot of Avatar Press stuff, and they have multiple variant covers for like There's one called Jungle Fantasy, and not to get too graphic, but here it is. One of their what they call extreme variant covers that a store could buy was the main character being double penetrated by Monkey Man on the cover.
Jesus.
Okay, and you're just like, and I saw this I walked in the comic shop, and it was up on the top, a top there. But if kids came in there, that's the type of thing they need a back room. If you're gonna have that stuff, just like the old video store, you need to put it in a back room, not up on a shelf.
Or brown
That
bag
can
it
be
at least. Yeah.
right, brown bag it
Yeah.
or whatever, something to and I would say that for all the cross covers, because if you look at the cross covers, holy crap,
they're vicious, yeah. But the thing also though, Slick, is the fact that what was something Todd just mentioned, kind of inadvertently, is the fact that if you're selling the right politic, well, you can do whatever you want, and unfortunately, the right politic is extreme deviance. Extreme deviance. It's not just normal, man and woman type of stuff. It's lesbianism, homosexuality, bestiality, all these kind of concepts. And I mean, we even have, full blown actual newspapers that are doing, editorials saying about how there's nothing wrong with being a pedophile. I mean, we really have that going on in this day and age. It's happening. With that said, Thundero, I am kind of trying to keep the conversation toward the extreme, because I don't think we have trouble with general adult sexuality. We're talking about extreme sexuality in the face of children with comic books, Thundero.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely fucking not. I'm gonna make that my catchphrase when you ask me questions like that. No, children don't need to be inundated with sexuality at all. Not until at least they're they're like 12, 13 years old.
When they start to maturate, then they kind of seek it out on their own. But I mean, even then, I don't know if somebody that young should see something like I just described.
No.
I really don't think that that shouldn't be that. They should be kissing and goofing around, playing doctor, that sort of stuff, whatever, spin the bottle at 11, 12, 13, not getting into the adultness of having sex and then having to deal with the repercussions of such. I don't think they should watch it. They should see it depicted either.
I think they've pushed too far in a lot of things, and especially this. And we're starting to see a backlash against it. I know a lot of younger people who are, in the early 20s who are not anti-sex, but they're anti-sexualization, anti-sexuality,
Sure.
and not just like radical feminists, like just normal kids who are just like, man, that's gross. They just don't want anything to do with it because they've been so inundated with it. They're over it, right?
Yeah,
and I think you're going to start to see a shift towards a more conservative media in that regard.
Yeah, no, the young generation is far more conservative, and it's the SJW's fault. They did it, and good, because it's what we need. And I know the chat is making a lot of jokes, but we're talking about we're not talking about adults buying adult products. That's not what we're talking about today. But when you mentioned the 12 or so, around that age, so some kids are a little bit early bloomers. We know that. But like when you guys are talking about the National Geographic Sears comic book, it's not Sears comic book, the Sears book and stuff like that. For me, we had a treehouse and we had a single Playboy. One. We managed to get a hold of it, and we kept it hidden up in our treehouse. And I believe
got a story like this too.
Well, no, but I mean, I think it's the one that had either Farrah Fawcett or Lonnie Anderson in it. I can't remember which, but either one is fine. But there's a big difference in the conversation when we start getting to kids who are becoming sexually mature and a 5-year-old. There's a big difference, right?
Well, it's also different between a child, a young man like yourself, looking for it, actively seeking it, and just a kid just trying to be a kid, and it's all over. You can't get away from it. There's a huge difference in scale between the two of those.
Sure.
Sorry, I'm opening a pill bottle for my wife.
Yeah, but it's also a much more tame thing compared to what we're seeing today.
Yeah. I mean, a Playboy is just artful nudity, right? It's not hardcore XXX, gangbangs or whatever.
I got a quick question.
I have less trouble with them seeing something like that because they should once they get to that desire to see stuff like that, I'm not saying you should show it to them, but they should be able to be taught an appreciation of art. And
And
the
women.
human form
Yeah.
is artful, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, are you going to tell them they can't go to a museum because there's a
Bullet.
statue with a naked
Well,
woman?
I mean,
Yeah,
or
that's
the same
extreme.
thing.
Yeah.
If you're going to go see, Michelangelo's David,
Right,
and you're going to hide their eyes because you see his penis.
Yeah, it's
No.
weird. Yeah, that reminds me of the Simpson episode. Larry, go ahead, dude.
I got Mr. DeWolf hit me up on Facebook. How do we send him a link to the Discord?
He needs to
Just
be in Discord.
he's in the
I'm
Discord.
pretty sure he's
Oh,
in the
he's
Discord.
saying to me, here, let me read what he said. He said, "Oh, hey, I'm looking for FanSpeak link, and I can't get into the Discord now."
Well, sure you can.
Oh, hang on, wait a minute. He might be. Hey, tell him to. Hey, if you can hear me, DeWolf, go into the live stream waiting room, and I'll drag you down.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Yeah, I
I'll
don't know
take
how that works.
if he doesn't hear you.
Yeah, so please do that, DeWolf. We'd love to hear what DeWolf has to say. I'm sure he has an opinion on it. While you do that, though, let me go into the last segment for today. And of course, it's about video gaming specific. Now, once again, we're talking about how sex has become part of the mainstream. I'm not talking about now. I know there. Oh, let me just do my presentation. That would be easier. Let me come over here and share my screen. And where's the one I want to share? Oh, here it is. This one right here. Okay, now you guys can take a look at my screen if you want to see it. You just can click on it and let me, and it seems to be blinking, but I'm going to do it differently. So let me do like this. All right. So I don't know what that is. We got to figure out what that blinking that goes on, but maybe it's fine now. It seems to be still blinking for you guys, though. I don't know what that is. But anyway, for you guys watching live, you don't have to worry about it. So let me come over here and do my thing. Now, uh, there have been a history of sex games, and that's not really what we're talking about, of course. But for me, as far as talking about mainstream stuff, my first time I noticed this was with the Conan game that came out about a decade or more ago. Now it's gone through many iterations. They made it free to play. They changed it to Unchained, then they changed it to something else. But it's the same game, and it was the first. Now there's no sex in the game per se, but there was nudity in the game. And this is a mainstream, big time MMO that came out, like I said, a decade or so ago. And that's the first time I noticed it in the mainstream. Now, of course, there's a lot of stuff from the past, sex games and stuff, and I'm going to date the hell out of myself with this, but I do recall Leisure Suit Larry,
Yeah, baby.
which is tame in compared to what we're talking about, but I do recall that. And
Cheeky.
it was cheeky, and then of course we also have the horror that is Japanese anime and Japanese sex games, which
Hente.
they yeah hentai. They go to extreme cases in some of those, and of course in Japan, most people aren't into that, but because Japan has very open rules about things like that, that you're kind of allowed to create and consume whatever you want. You might find this a little bit funny about Japan, seeing is that they have a lot of socialistic aspects to their society. But in truth, I don't know of a society on Earth that protects your privacy more than the Japanese. That is the ultimate thing to Japan. Even when they did these shutdowns and things in Japan, they didn't shut down Japan. They suggested that you shut down, right? Because they can't do that. And this freedom is what has allowed these things to be created. But of course, the Japanese stuff can get really harsh. Right, but I'm not here to talk about these specific things because those things were mature rated for adults only, and they're intended to be for adults only. There is no trying to push or commercialize it into the mainstream. There's none of that, right? Conan did a little bit, and but there's three things that have come up here recently that have caught my eye. One of them was mentioned by someone on this show. Booster said it wasn't him. I think it was him, but someone mentioned on this show was the subverse thing, because I remember saying, "What the hell does that mean?" And they were explaining to me that something sub means, I don't know, sub below or something like that. A bottom, I think he said. But anyway, that one. But the other two I saw watching the Lazy Peon. Now I like the Lazy Peon. He's a British fella, and I love MMOs, and he talks about MMO reviews, and I think I've also seen it on MMO Byte and and maybe a little bit on Cry as well. But these because they're mainstream, right? So we do have this Subverse thing. Now this thing it seems to be a space game, but it's also extremely sexualized. So I'm not sure if this is mainstream or not, but I think it's on the edge of it. But these other two most certainly are. This one, of course, is League of Maidens, which is coming out soon. And I'm extremely interested in it. You know why? Because it's a superhero MMO, and I'm desperate for one. Since they killed City of Heroes, we haven't had a good one since. So I'm hoping this is going to be really cool. But it has not only sexuality in it, it has full on, from what they're saying, sex is in the game. You can actually do sex play in the game as well as doing everything else you do in an MMO. I mean, shooting and doing missions and all the normal stuff you do in an MMO. Plus, they're adding this, and this is pretty mainstream. There's a lot of people waiting for this, right? And the other one is another very interesting one is Wildlife. Wildlife has some of the best graphics I've seen in any game. They're doing a full-on MMO where you have to do missions, you have to fight, you have to build your gear up, and all the stuff you would do in the game, right? Plus, they have a full-on sex play aspect of the game, full on. This is more so than League of Maidens, I think. But my point is, these are mainstream, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are backing and waiting for these mainstream games. Like I said, I don't know how mainstream this one is. I think it's a little on the edge because this seems to be more sex than game. These other ones, though, are full games that have sex in them, and they're mainstream MMOs, and they have no reservation whatsoever. This is the what I wanted to talk about was is this okay? One, because these are certainly going to be rated, but we know parents, majority of parents don't take care of paying attention whatsoever. We know this. But even though they're supposed to be rated, these things are mainstream, and here they are, dude. I mean, because for the longest time, games and TV shows and stuff like that were very wary of getting into that field of things. But these days, it seems not. We look at a lot of our TV shows that are coming out from CW and stuff. There's a lot of sexuality in them, particularly homosexuality and lesbianism and a
Where
lot
are
of other stuff.
these two being produced? Where's the
I didn't research them that deeply, as far as who's making it and stuff, and I'm not really looking to call anybody out anyway. That's not the point.
well,
These
what I'm
are
saying
being
is like different societies. I don't know if that could get made here, at least right now, with the current zeitgeist. But
they are though. I'm sure these guys have gotten pushback. I'm sure because I think I remember the Lazy Peon mentioning the pushback they were getting, particularly the League of Maidens. But they don't care. Now is this now I know this Wildlife one I think is being made in Europe. I'm not sure about the League of Maidens one, but maybe they're both European. But what do you guys think about these? These are full-on mainstream games. These are not being sold as sex games. They are MMOs that you can join, but they have hardcore sex play in them. I mean, it's not just it's not Leisure Suit Larry. This is subtle and jokey. It's not the same thing. This is full on, dude. And like I said, Subverse thing, I'm not really sure how that qualifies, but I put it in here just because it is another MMO that's coming out. But these two particularly, I think, are very interesting. What do you guys think about this?
Well, I'm an avid gamer. I run game streams almost nightly. I never heard of any of these games you just shown me.
Well,
First time
maybe
hearing.
you're not an MMOer.
Well, I played a lot of Star Wars Galaxies. I played City of Heroes. I played
Oh,
World of
okay.
Warcraft. I played EverQuest 1 and 2. Planet Side. Yeah, so I know I played some MMOs. But I'd never heard of these, so I don't know how mainstream these really are. But I can tell you games that had sex that were mainstream. We can talk about GTA, where you can go hire a hooker and bang her in
right.
the back room.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Cyberpunk 2077, which is coming out in September, just announced that you can design your own junk.
Yeah, no, that's another thing I was going to mention. Cyberpunk is going to have sex in it as well, and you can actually custom design your genitalia. Wonderful.
Yeah, you can custom design your genitalia, and that's a game I'm actually going to be playing and looking forward to. Now, these three games you just showed me here, I'm going to find out more about them. I'm particularly interested, like you said, in the superhero one because I, too, really like City of Heroes. That was the best game for customizing a character ever, period.
Yes, and I checked out the customization on this game because I'm actually interested in it. I love superhero games. The creators love the huge breast and huge butt. It's their thing. But in the customization, you can make anything you want. It's one of the best customization, I don't know what you call it, windows or creator windows that I've ever seen. And that's cool.
No,
You can make whatever you want, and I'm very interested in it because I love these things.
the,
But
the topic though was children getting a hold of these, right? Like I don't
yes,
think, while it may technically be possible that the 5-year-old steals a credit card or gets access to this somehow, some way, it's very unlikely that that's what they're doing. They're going to be more interested in playing Animal Crossing than they are going to be interested in playing Subverse. You know what I mean? Like,
sure. Yeah, but what about, because the fact that these mainstream, and I was going to mention the cyberpunk thing. Thank you for beating me to it. But the cyberpunk thing, that you think that game's not going to be enormously mainstream? You think not?
uh,
You think how many parents
well,
are going to buy that for
no, no,
that
it's
for their
going to be
little kid?
mainstream because it's going to be on, because